All right, so I wanted to show you a tip that allows us to do in-context editing in all of our sub-assemblies and have them fit within the larger robot assembly. So the key to doing this is creating what's called a reference cube. So here's my chassis part studio. And you can do this at the very beginning before you do anything, but I like to do it after the chassis is at least partially done. So this is probably almost a completely done chassis. You don't have to wait this long, but at any point, your chassis person who built their chassis off of the master sketch. So let me show you this master sketch to remind you what we did here. Here's the master sketch. It fits in line with that. Okay, so everything's lined up with it here. You're going to make a reference cube right at the origin. So to do this, you say, all right, I'm going to make a new sketch. I'm going to select this top plane. And then right at the origin, I'm going to do a center point rectangle. Right at the origin. And I'm going to make it 1 inch by 1 inch. Finish the sketch. And then extrude that square downwards by 1 inch as well. Okay, so it's created this cube that is on the origin. I like to put it just beneath the origin, that way it's never going to intersect with any of my parts. And it's kind of there to serve as a reference point that all my other sub-assemblies can build off of. Okay, so let's go into the chassis assembly over here. And I already created this assembly, and when I made this assembly, I made sure to import and fix these in place so that they matched my master sketch. Let me go ahead and add and insert my reference cube as well, part 12. Delete that. Okay, you can see I put it into the same spot. Now, it could move around. We don't want that. So I probably should make sure that it exists in the exact same spot that it does in my master sketch, or in my part studio. So I'm going to fasten it right to the origin, just like it is. And so this should all be relative to each other the exact same way that all of my part studio, the parts I make are relative to each other, and they all match the master sketch. This is all sort of setting the stage for a full bot CAD assembly. So let's go ahead and start that. I'm going to go back to OnShape, it's a menu here. Go back within the folder. I'm working here in Team Mundell. I'm going to create a new document, and I'm going to call this full bot. The entire bot is going to live within here. I'm not going to make parts in here. I'm just going to pull sub-assemblies that my team members have made into here. So I'm going to go to Assembly 1. And I'm going to say, I'm going to insert from another document. And let's find that chassis that I just made. I'm going to insert the assembly. Let's create a new version of it. Give it a moment. Assembly 1. I should rename that chassis, but I haven't yet. So I'm going to take this, and my chassis is just floating around, but because I've got this reference cube, I can say, you know what? That should be floating right here on the origin. Wait a second. Why did that not move relative to it? These are moving together. Okay. Fasten. Oh, I just had to click solve. I don't know why. There we go. So there it all is. Okay, and it's in the exact same spot it is on in the sub-assembly for chassis. Okay. Now let's make another sub-assembly. So let's say I'm somebody else on the team, and I'm going to make an intake. So what I'm going to do is, well, I'm basing my intake off the master sketch. So first I want to derive the master sketch in, which, you know, we know where that is. That is under this practice here. That's the chassis master sketch. Here's the intake master sketch. I'm going to put both of them in there. So I'm going to be building around here. Ooh, I probably actually want to include the bumper one as well. Let's include the bumper because my intake has to go over the bumper. Okay, so I've got those master sketches in. And just like in my chassis, I'm going to make a reference cube. So let's create a sketch here on the top plane. Center point rectangle, 1 inch by 1 inch. And let's go ahead and extrude it down by 1 inch. I'm going to go to my assembly and start my assembly by inserting that reference cube. That reference cube should be fastened to the origin, just like that. So this reference cube represents the same reference cube that's going to be found in all of my sub-assemblies, and it's located in the same point at the origin where it'll be located in all my sub-assemblies. So if I put this cube into the full bot assembly, all those sub-assemblies will be in their corresponding parts. Let me show you how to do that. Let's go back to full bot. We've got my assembly open. I'm going to insert from my other documents that intake. I do need to create a version again. Go to the assembly. I'm going to insert that assembly. Now it probably looked like nothing came in because in reality what just came in was the other reference cube, and they're right on top of each other and they're identical. So if I can, let me go ahead and hide this is my chassis sub-assembly. You can see here's my assembly for my intake, which right now is just a cube. So I do want to make sure that this is located at the exact same spot, so let's go ahead and fasten it as well to the origin. Cool. So there's actually 2 view cubes, 1 in each of them. Okay. So here's where the magic happens. I go to my intake sub-assembly. Let's go ahead and hide the large chassis one. This is my intake. This is the cube for my intake. And if I right-click it and say Edit in Context, it's going to take me back to the document where that cube is made, which is my intake document. So I click Edit in Context. Oh, I messed up. Let's undo this. I messed up because I did not have the chassis visible when I did that. So I do need to bring back the chassis there. I just need to make sure that I'm selecting the view cube from the intake. So here's part 1 here. So now that that's showing, I'm going to right click and say Edit in Context. Because it'll take whatever was in that current assembly view, it'll make it this ghost. And I've got now this ghost of the rest of the robot, which, you know, I can bring in stronger or weaker depending how I want it. But it will allow me to make parts in my intake part studio using reference points from my full bot CAD. Now that's important because I'm about to make a plate here that's going to mount my intake on. And I really need to make sure that it's on this this piece of 2x1 right there. So I'm in Part Studio 1 for the intake, but I can see that. So I'm going to click Sketch. I'm going to start making this right on that surface. It's on the face of that context. Let me go ahead and make this real quick. I'm going to draw lines from the bottom here to there. This is where my axle for my intake is going to go. So I'm going to be something like around like that. And back down to maybe, let's say here. Okay, so I close that in. I'm going to need I think this is some max spline axle here, so this needs to be a pretty big bearing. I think it's I want to guess 47 millimeters. That could be wrong. I'm just guessing here. And I need to locate it with my master sketch right here. So like that. Okay. Put a couple more dimensions here. I won't take too long doing this, but I want it to be at least be a somewhat realistic part here. And this part is tangent, and this part is tangent. And let's go ahead and dimension these from here to there. Make it 1/8 of an inch. If it's right up against it, it might have a hard time fitting if our manufacturing isn't spot on. And we'll make that 3.75. There we go. So I've got this sketch here. Let me hide my other sketches. And you know what? I'm even going to hide my context. Up here under Assembly Context, I can now click None, and it goes away. And I can see this sketch here of this part I wanted to make. And look, I can even select there. I have the holes that are showing. I didn't have to even use them. Let's go ahead and extrude this by 1/4 of an inch. So this piece now is located exactly where it should be for this to fit. I'm built off of the location. This gap here from my right plane to this is the right distance. And if I want to check that, I can always go up to my assembly context and click context 1, and it'll come back, and I can see that it fits there with it. Now this won't update as we update the full-bot CAD. Okay, this will always be this context. If you want to update it, you can go to these 3 dots and click Update Context, and then it will update it. So if somebody else on my team puts the shooter in, or puts more structure in, or changes the chassis, I can update the context, and this will get added to where it is. But it's pretty convenient there. I can build off of it now, and I can make sure that everything fits accordingly. You can know when your context is being used because you'll see these little arrows that says, hey, that sketch takes advantage of a context. So you might right click and you might want to say, hey, I want to update this one's context here, and which context it uses. But you can scroll through any of them. Now I did have to make a part for that context to get saved. If I just said, hey, edit in context, don't make a new sketch 2 here, and just move on and leave the context and come back to it later, I won't have access to that. But now because it was used in Sketch 2, I have access to it whenever I want. Okay? It does need to be updated if things change, but you can just regularly update those contexts as you see fit. So there we go. Now I can build off of that. And that's how you, and you would make one of these reference cubes in every one of your sub-assemblies so that you could insert a context, a ghost of the whole robot as you wanted. All right. So I highly recommend doing that. We'll be doing it as a full team when the season comes around.